In 2020, Israel experienced a third inconclusive election, an unprecedented constitutional crisis, and then a devastating pandemic.
Israel had neither an elected government nor an approved budget when the virus hit.
Under the shadow of COVID-19, the interim government tried to temporarily shut down the Knesset and the courts in the middle of the night.
The initial lockdown may have been necessary, but it had devastating economic consequences. Within weeks, we went from less than 4% unemployment to over 30%.
And people were dying.
The virus doesn't discriminate between Jews and Arabs.
We knew that we had to devote all of our resources to help guide Israel out of this dangerous political, economic, and health crisis. Fortunately, although no one anticipated the pandemic, IDI stood ready, equipped with data and policy proposals developed over many years. And as a result, we were often the first stop for policymakers seeking practical solutions.
We worked around the clock to help the government put together a rescue package for the economy. We helped develop measures to prolong unemployment benefits, provide relief to the self-employed workers, and provide employers with the incentives to keep workers on the payroll during future lockdowns.
After 3 elections, a political ceasefire was finally achieved. While the unity government was far from perfect and ultimately collapsed, with our encouragement, it included key mechanisms needed for managing the pandemic and protecting the rule of law and our Supreme Court.
The highest rates of contagion were among the ultra-Orthodox, partly because they were listening to the rabbis and not to the government, partly because many Haredim do not use the internet, and also because of their crowded living conditions. Despite these difficult circumstances, we helped the Ministry of Health, Law Enforcement and Welfare Services devise effective means to communicate with the Haredi community, thereby saving lives.
We understood early on that even in the midst of this national emergency, it was essential to protect our democracy. And we demanded that the courts and parliament remain open and show that effective parliamentary oversight could be exercised even in a pandemic. And when politically motivated attempts were made to curtail the right to protest, we fought hard for measures that would allow demonstrators to protest in a safe manner, even during a pandemic. Despite the difficult circumstances, we also made strides in pushing for important democratic reforms. The Attorney General recently announced the creation of a government task force to fight corruption, and a multi-partisan Knesset coalition was formed to move forward with bills based on IDI proposals to ensure transparency in election campaigning and enshrine the right to civic equality in Israel's constitutional structure.
There's no doubt that times of emergency call for decisive action. And at the same time, we're working with all the relevant political parties and government agencies to make sure that crucial checks and balances are preserved.
Crises are also opportunities to push reforms that are hard to pass in ordinary times. I'm very proud of our work to expand professional training programs, which are absolutely necessary now that more than 500,000 Israelis are out of work. And I'm delighted that 5 government agencies have already begun implementing our initiative to create a greener, more efficient economy for Israel by 2050.
Israel's Arab community was hard hit. The danger now is because of COVID-19, socioeconomic gaps will widen, leaving the poorest citizen behind. We couldn't let that happen. So what did we do? We intensified our efforts. We raced forward with a comprehensive plan to boost our participation into the workforce and are now shaping a government decision that will hopefully close the gaps and increase representation in decision-making positions.
We know that the months ahead are going to be challenging, but we're ready. The fight against COVID-19 is ongoing. The sense of solidarity within Israeli society is weakening as the rift with the ultra-Orthodox community continues to widen, and the political situation remains unstable as we head to a 4th election campaign in 2 years, making IDI's electoral reform plan more necessary than ever. Nevertheless, my colleagues and I are determined to lead the way with evidence-based solutions to the practical problems facing Israel at this difficult moment. We're dedicated to improving the lives of all Israelis while making sure Israel lives up to the promise embodied in the Declaration of Independence. A vibrant Jewish and democratic state we can all be proud of.